Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please go ahead and knock that out while you're here. All right, Norlander, some notable NCAA news in the past 24 hours. The NCAA Board of Directors on Wednesday adopted several measures designed to assist with the mass influx of athletes in the transfer portal while also modernizing its infractions process. Put another way, there's now a 60-day transfer window for everybody, including basketball players, and RIP IARP. Deadleg, to the best of your ability, tell the folks what happened on Wednesday and why it matters.
RIP IARP. That is actually tough to say a few times fast here. Okay, so we've got the IARP and the new infraction stuff, and then we've got the transfer stuff. You pick, GP. Let's just cut these in half. What do you want me to start with first?
Let's go transfer first.
All right, transfer. Okay, so all college sports now have transfer windows. They differ depending on when the sports are played. If you're in the fall, there's a 45-day window, and then there's another one on the back end in May. In the winter, college basketball, for our purposes, what we're going to talk about here, there is one singular 60-day transfer window. I will get into what that actually means. And then spring sports have the reverse, where they've got an early window and then a 45-day on the back end. For college basketball, this 60-day window will start the Monday after Selection Sunday, and it will end then 60 days later, so in mid-May. The previous deadline this past year was May 1. Now you're going to be looking around May 15th, or give or take. It's going to be a 60-day window. Why is there a single 60-day window for transferring? Well, the NCAA and the Transformation Committee, which is headed up by Julie Cromer, the Ohio AD, and Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, received loads of feedback over the past 8-9 months, basically. And there was a big push among many coaches and ADs in all sorts of sports to condense this, to not basically have an ongoing, cycle where players could go into the portal whenever they wanted. Just if they want to leave, they can leave. But for official purposes, let's make this where they have more than enough time to decide if they're going to leave, but really just try and square it off, if you will. So college basketball will have 60 days. Now, to be clear about this, okay? One, I heard there was a little bit of blowback on, well, why wouldn't you start this after the NCAA tournament ends? Well, there's still going to be 5 or 6 weeks from the end of the tournament to the end of the portal closing. So anyone that was playing postseason ball, they will have more than enough time to do that. There is no debt. This transfer window does not mean that at the end of the 60-day period, everyone that's decided to go into the portal must decide where they're going to their new school. No, you have 60 days to merely officially put your name into the portal. Now, if you're Joe Q Jump Shot and you decide on December 7th, I'm done. I'm leaving this team. I'm out. You can tweet it. You can announce it. You can tell the team. You can tell the world. People will know you're on the. No one's stopping that from happening. That will continue to happen. We will still have tweets, news. Hey, this player, he just tweeted out that, it's been real, but I'm out of here in the middle of January. That's still going to happen. That player just simply can't go into the portal until it opens the Monday after Selection Sunday. From a rules standpoint, that player will not be allowed to be contacted by other schools until they're in the portal, but whatever. That's not stopping coaches, obviously, in AAU coaches or other representatives from finding you if need be. Again, tampering is one of college sports' greatest traditions. This new 60-day transfer window, Parrish, as you well know, that's not stopping that, but it does make for something a little bit cleaner. A couple more quick details and chime in here, GP. Reminder, first-time transfers, immediately eligible everywhere. Now, the D1 board opted against always eligible transfers. Second time, third time, they are not immediately eligible. One of the big concerns there was the thought that players would do this. Every time you transfer, not all your credits transfer, it would reduce graduation rates. So that is not a thing. Cynicism is still out there about whether or not this becomes something that sticks. And by that, GP, I mean, you can still apply for a waiver. Here's what the language is from the NCAA. The legislation also establishes exceptions to the new windows for student athletes who experience head coach changes. So if you're a second-time transfer and you had a head coach change, you can apply for a waiver. You're going to be immediately eligible, basically. Or if had athletics aid reduced, canceled, or not renewed, i.e. if the coach ran a player off. Now, you're going to have to get the coach to agree that he got run off. That might not be the easiest thing. One more thing, the board also adopted new, more specific standards for immediate eligibility waivers for student athletes who do not otherwise meet the one-time transfer exception, focusing on the student athlete well-being or circumstances outside the student athlete's control. So the NCAA doesn't want to get sued or deal with more just cases like this where a player wants to be eligible, they've been ruled ineligible. We'll see on that. But the big takeaways are the 60-day window, which will, like, for our purposes, like, this will actually create an aggressive news cycle. Maybe that's a good thing for college basketball. We talk more about transfers this year than ever before. It actually generates interest in news. And then there's not transfer whenever you want, however often you want with immediate eligibility. That was punted on. That's not going to stick. But again, with the waiver situation, we'll see how true that reality is, Parrish, a year or 2 or 3 down the road.
Minor complaint, and I can't emphasize the word minor enough, because this won't impact my life in any tangible way. I'm not a college basketball coach, but I don't like the start date of the window. I think you are at some level of disadvantage if you're playing in the NCAA tournament, because Monday after Selection Sunday, we're flying to San Antonio for a round of 64 game. We're prepping, scouting reports, all of this stuff. And hey, an interesting player just entered the transfer portal. Hey, I need one of you to go work on that. Hey, I got to take a phone call on this. I don't like the idea that you are placed in a situation as a staff where you theoretically would have to allot some time to recruiting when you really should be focused on the task at hand, which is everybody focused on our opponent in this NCAA tournament. And if you end up advancing to the Final Four, well, that's 3 weeks of time where certain staffs have really nothing to do other than recruit, and you have lots of things to do other than recruit. And so it puts, again, in theory, the best programs in the country at some level of disadvantage. You're going to have to pick how you spend your time. As a member of a staff, how am I spending my time today? Am I in the transfer portal, or am I focusing on we've got a round of 32 game against Michigan on Sunday? And so I put me in charge. I would have wanted to push the date back until the Tuesday after the national championship game, or maybe the Monday after the Elite Eight. And then you're only however your disadvantage, it's literally 4 teams. And so whatever disadvantage they have in this area, they'll be able to raise Final Four banners and offset it perhaps. But again, minor complaint, but I don't like it starting when it starts.
Just real quick on that. I'd been talking to coaches about this issue for a number of months. They wanted a 45-day window with exactly what you're saying, because the reason why it ends in mid-May, semester ends there, school's wrapping up. You don't want to have to deal with this stuff as you get into June, understandably so. Like, you want to have this from a winter sports perspective, get it wrapped up in the first couple of weeks of May. But coaches wanted this thing to be about 45 days. The problem is what's good for, and this gets back to an issue where coaches are just let us have our own rules for basketball. NCAA, when it comes to transferring, is just not going to do that. But what works for 45 days in college basketball doesn't work in college football. And some other sports might viably need or be better suited for a 60-day window, no matter how those 60 days are broken up. But they wanted to keep it consistent. And so that's where they landed the day after championship selections are made, i.e. the day after Selection Sunday. I hear you. It also, we'll see. If you're good enough to be in the tournament, the players that matter that are transferring, for the most part, you might get 2 or 3, but I do very much think that there will be situations where the bracket comes out Sunday, we're talking about it all day Monday, Tuesday, and then occasionally there's 2 or 3 good players that are in the portal, and it's like, well, this doesn't even matter right now because we got way bigger fish to fry. But I know it's not perfect. Nothing pretty much ever is there. But the other thing with this, I tweeted out, a head coach texted me after this came out on Wednesday night, and he said, the machine is going to break down. There's no more mid-year transfers at the semester, which doesn't bother me. Coaches are kind of mixed on this. Some actually really like it. But the only other thing, and I'll be real quick on this, is because this is going to be the reality of the sport and how we talk about it once the season ends. Transfers being in the portal can take official visits. This is going to be a thing now in April and May, where previously, as you well know, Parrish, for the majority of our time here at CBS, April was the first live period. Now, we wouldn't usually go out in April, but coaches go out. They see those players that before they play on the circuit in July, they're trying to get in there so that when July comes, they're already kind of established, be it if it's a rising sophomore, rising junior, rising senior. Now, the overwhelming majority of coaches are getting to a point where April has to be about how are we getting our roster better? How are we getting older? How are we getting a transfer on? We need to have these official visits. So either some of the staff is going to be taking care of the official visit with the transfer, or the entire staff is, and the recruiting calendar might well need to get changed here, because you're going to have a lot of coaches simply not going out and recruiting high school kids in person in April, because why the hell are you doing it? Why am I going to look at a 15 or 16-year-old in April when I've got a 21-year-old on my campus that's going to be more to my team next season than this kid that we might get and might be good 3 years from now? So that's another consequence from this. You might well see a change in the recruiting calendar in college basketball. If not, April's just going to get really fractured, really noisy, and that's now become the next big discussion behind the scenes in college hoops.
I do think that they need to figure the calendar out a little better in that regard. You shouldn't be picking between, do I go to a grassroots event this weekend, or do I focus on re-recruiting my own team and recruiting guys who are in the transfer portal? It's a disservice to everybody. The high school players if you're arguing in favor of grassroots basketball, like, there's a lot of bad, but if you're arguing the good, it's the exposure that you get in a room with college coaches. They get to see you in ways they otherwise wouldn't even know you exist, perhaps. And now you lessen that exposure, because didn't the Florida staff tell you when you were spending time with them, like, there were times they just did not go out at all?
That's right. They spent two coaches spent 1 day on the road period in April looking at high school kids. Everything else was dedicated to the transfer portal.
Right. So if you really care about the high school kids, and people say that they do, well, this is a disservice to the high school kids, because they're not being seen as much as otherwise would be seen. So I would straighten that out. Let's have a live evaluation, grassroots, 5-day period or whatever. I'm not arguing about the days, but I just think that should be separate from, a time where coaches are focused on re-recruiting their own teams and being involved in the transfer portal. As it pertains to the 60-day window, just to revisit that real quickly, and then we can move on to the IARP news. I guess my example, because I think you said, like, all right, it's the Monday after Selection Sunday, and maybe a couple of good players are in there, but most of them don't matter. And I agree with you, most of them don't matter, because I have insisted for years, as people were going crazy about transfers, most of them don't matter, period. But hypothetically speaking, let's say, and I know SMU played in the NIT last season, but let's say SMU misses the NCAA tournament. They get an NIT game, on the Tuesday after Selection Sunday. They lose it next morning. Kendrick Davis is in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Well, he matters.
He does, yes.
And now you're a staff. It's Wednesday morning. You're playing either Thursday or Friday in the NCAA tournament, but Kendrick Davis just went into, or a player of his caliber just went into the transfer portal. Now you've got to pick, how am I going to spend my time today? Am I going to keep focusing on my round of 64 game? I got media obligations, all the travel. Or am I going to be on the phone with Kendrick Davis's mom, AAU coach, Kendrick Davis himself? Like, I don't think it's great that you're asked to make those types of choices. And that's why I would prefer the 60-day window start later. But again, I can't emphasize the word minor enough. It's a minor complaint.
All right, IARP and new infractions process here. This to me is just as significant as the transfer stuff, if not more. So, and this all got voted in yesterday. It's not going to be. It doesn't take effect until January 1 of 2023. Here's what Jerry Moorhead, the president of Georgia and who's the chair of the board of directors, said in a statement. He said, these changes to the overall infractions process will accelerate the timelines for infractions cases. Again, accelerate the timelines. Important. We'll see. He continues, quote, with the adoption of the new constitution in January, NCAA members committed to resolving cases fairly and in a timely fashion, thus holding those responsible for violations accountable and avoiding penalizing those who were not involved in rule breaking, end quote. My words, i.e. the players. Some of the changes to the process include a more clearly defined violation of charging standards for the enforcement staff, clarification about the role of school leadership and investigation. That's an intriguing one to me. This is also intriguing. I don't have more details on this. A new standard for head coach responsibility requirements. Is this, more standards or lessening the standards? I'd love some detail on that. We don't have transparency on that specifically right now. And then the creation of a public-facing dashboard for existing infraction cases. The appeals process is also changing there. Are we going to get more transparency from the NCAA as these cases are happening? Will they actually be resolved faster? I don't quite know what the answer to that is. The NCAA continued the first proposal with amending this infraction process, quote, focuses on increasing cooperation in infractions cases, increasing transparency during the infractions process, and expediting the resolution of infractions cases, end quote, GP. I will believe it when I see it. This is, I feel like, the fourth time in the past 10 to 12 years where the NCAA has announced an amendment, an upgrade, a streamlining of its infractions process, its adjudicated process. It continues to keep stepping on it. What were your thoughts overall on what you saw here before we get into the IARP and the death of all that?
Well, first, I agree with you. I'll believe it when I see it. They've been talking about streamlining the process and, doing these things more quickly. You got a mute button, don't you?
I do. I was muted.
Okay.
Did it not mute me?
I don't think so.
Really?
It doesn't matter. I hope you're feeling okay.
I'm all right. Yeah.
All right. They've been talking about streamlining the process forever. I think it's a little bit like, my kids, my little guys, they keep telling me they'll keep their toy room clean. I'll believe it when I see it. It seems like I'm always the one picking up the toys. They don't quite follow through on what they say. They're good kids, but they mean well. I think they're telling the truth, that they're going to do their best. But for one reason or another, the toy room just doesn't stay as clean as I think it should be. And this is the history of the NCAA. Constantly talking about we need to be better about this and then never actually being better. So, yeah, I'm with you. I'll believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. As far as head coach responsibility, I think it should be increased. I think that is the biggest. We've heard for decades about rogue assistants. Oh, he's a rogue assistant. Oh, that guy, that assistant, he just went wild. The biggest deterrent to rogue assistants is having a head coach say, you can't do this because it'll get me in trouble. Like the opposite was true. Head coaches used to literally encourage their assistants. Go, hey, I don't need to know. Go do what you got to do. Just get it done. Get the job done. And there's countless examples of school gets busted, assistant gets caught, assistant gets fired, and coach lives to coach another day because, hey, he didn't know what was going on. That shady assistant was just being shady. I actually sat in a coaches meeting, high major coach. He was within the past few years, had his entire staff in there. And this coach was literally reading his contract and NCAA rules to his staff. And he was saying, this contract, I am guaranteed, let's just say it was $18 million. They have to pay me $18 million. It doesn't matter if I lose every game. They have to pay me $18 million. The only way they don't have to pay me $18 million is if I break rules or you break rules. Now, I'm not breaking any rules because I'm not costing myself $18 million. And so let me be clear. I am not asking you to operate in the gray area. I am not asking you to break rules. I'm begging you not to because it will cost me $18 million. There is no player you can get me that is going to be worth $18 million to me. And what that coach understood is that once upon a time, you could go out, break rules, and you would pay the price for that. You would pay the price for that. I wouldn't pay the price for that. But now, given the way contracts are written and the way the NCAA rules are enforced, I will have to pay the price for you, quote unquote, cheating. So don't cheat. I think that's a good thing. Although I don't even know what cheating looks like anymore. But I think if you're trying to keep the quote rogue assistants in line, the best way to do that, or among the best, one of the ways to do that, is to have their bosses who used to, nudge them a certain direction. Now their boss is saying, you can't do that because it'll get me. I'll be the one that gets in trouble, and I care about me. So no. I think that's a good thing in the sport.
All right, IARP is going away. Born out of the FBI investigation, which then was born out of the Rice Commission, which was formed after the FBI investigation. Formed in 2019, dead in 2022. The NCAA says the IARP will be dissolved after the 5 remaining cases in that process are adjudicated. Reminder, we have not had a single case adjudicated by the IARP to this point. The 5 schools are Arizona, LSU, Memphis, Kansas, and Louisville. Actually, let me reorder that. The order of those cases as they will come out, as I understand it, is Memphis first, then Kansas, then Arizona, then LSU. Louisville is the shiftiest one because the Chris Mack stuff got attached to it after. So whereas before, I think Louisville was third in line. I mean, maybe it's still third, could be fourth, could be fifth. I don't have an exact line on Louisville, but unless something changes behind the scenes, it's going to be Memphis, and then it's going to be Kansas. And then it's a question if it's Arizona or Louisville first. Those schools are going to be ruled on by the IARP. The question becomes, with the stuff that came out here, yes, a lot of this goes into effect in 2023. Will the schools be subject to significant punishments such as postseason bans? Because this is also under future considerations with what the NCAA announced on Wednesday. Further considerations include requiring increased whatever, that doesn't matter, adjusting the size and composition of the Committee on Infractions, whatever, identifying appropriate types of penalties and modifying current penalty ranges, including identifying potential alternative penalties to postseason bans. They did not take postseason bans off the table. There was a lingering curiosity if that was going to happen. It has not. I do think these schools are still in the crosshairs of facing postseason bans. I still think Bill Self is facing a significant suspension whenever Kansas does get the punishment there. The NCAA has always struggled with consistency and precedent and fairness with its punishments, in large part because of 2 factors. One, rule breaking and circumstances within different cases always have different details. So to an extent, if you're the NCAA, while you want to keep your house in order, you're constantly setting yourself up for criticism and whataboutism when one school is punished, LMNOP, and another school is punished XYZ, right? The number 2 is the inherently warped adjudication process when you'll punish a program for wrongdoings. And in many instances, those wrongdoings are because of the coaches or the staff, but the players face the brunt of it. So trying to resolve those issues has always been a huge problem with the NCAA. Frankly, it's why it keeps continuing to try and change this process every 2, 4, 5 years. It's not easy. Again, they're trying to update this altogether. I want before we go on to Candid Coaches, because this is going to be a pretty quick pod here. GP's got to get moving, but I want your thoughts. One, I think postseason bans should still be out there. I think they're the one significant deterrent, and with improved transfer stuff, GP, things kind of link. Like, it's the one thing you can still threaten a program with that I think has real impact. You take away that now, even if you could say, we're going to penalize a coach or a coaching staff, and you're not going to be able to work for a year or half a year or 2 years. That is significant, but like to an actual institution, I don't think they should get rid of postseason bans, and they didn't. Remains to be seen how much that'll get implemented going forward. So your thoughts on that, and then any thoughts about the fact that the IARP, which has been handling these 5 cases, they didn't toss it out, the baby with the bathwater with this. Those cases will get resolved. There's no more new ones. But those 5 will stand alone. They will be the 5 that have been ruled on by the IARP. What are your 2 thoughts on that as we wrap up this part of the talk?
On the IARP, it's just another failed attempt to try to do a part of the job better. It was labeled as this new, quicker, better, less complicated way to handle cases and resolve them. And
but there's independent oversight, GP, allegedly. Whether that was truly independent or not, but the NCAA is now saying we don't want it anymore.
Well, like in the Memphis case, they are literally arguing that this was not independent from the NCAA at all. You had an NCAA investigator handling some of the I guess the NCAA would call it questioning. Memphis would call it interrogating.
Yeah.
But either way, they part of Memphis's argument is literally that this was not independent in the way that you said it would be. So it's just another failed attempt, and it'll be replaced with, something different. But the idea that it was introduced as this great new thing, and it's gone so quickly, like it barely outlasted Kim and Pete. It's another terrible thing on Mark Emmert's resume, by the way. He was the one that wanted the Rice Commission. He's the one that wanted all this, and we look up in 3 years, he's heading out of a job here in the next year, and the IRP is dead. And then postseason bans, I'm with you. I think I have mixed feelings about them. I don't like the idea of, quote, punishing people who were in high school when this stuff happened. But the counter argument to that has always been, if this stuff happens in high school, when you were in high school, and it still hasn't been resolved at this university, if you're actually worried about being banned from the NCAA tournament, perhaps you should pick a different university. And that in by extension becomes part of a punishment for alleged rule breaking or actual rule breaking. So I could argue both sides of it pretty easily, but I do agree with you. It is the biggest hammer out there to use against a school that's been breaking the rules. I guess where I struggle with this, as we're trying to figure out what's fair punishment, what's unfair punishment, is that we're living in a time where what would even lead to you being punished? Like, what could you do to get in trouble right now?
I mean, there still are rules. Like, I understand what you're saying, but like in particular, like, egregious mass academic fraud for one,
Sure.
and like they are, we don't need to go down this avenue all the way, but like they are trying to define what should and should not be allowed from an NIL perspective. And, I could bring up the laugh track right here. Like they've even asked for schools to help narc on other schools with, these with, just to, I know, I know,
right.
But like there are still things out there and rules, and you do need rules. Like,
sure. For instance, practicing too many hours a week, having the wrong people on the court with players.
Right. That's not a postseason ban, but
right.
But yes.
Academic fraud is obviously still a thing. But for the most part, what schools find themselves quote in trouble for is, illegal recruiting, booster involvement in recruiting, assistant coaches dropping off bags, all stuff that can get done legally differently right now. Like if your goal is to get $50,000 to a recruit, 5 years ago, you had to break a rule to do that. Now you can smartly, very easily, and legally get that done. So as it pertains to what usually would get people in big trouble, that kind of stuff is mostly off the table right now for anybody with even half a brain. But I do believe we will get to a point where the rules will be more clearly established. I don't know when. And then, yes, if you're going to have rules, you've got to have punishments for schools that break those rules. And though if I were a Memphis, LSU, Louisville, Arizona, Kansas fan, I would be encouraged by the idea that they're at least considering, thinking about, talking about getting rid of postseason bans, because it implies, at least suggests to me, that if they are even on some level uncomfortable with postseason bans, how hesitant are they going to be to give any of these schools postseason bans? Impossible to know for sure, but I would take that as a positive sign if I were one of these schools still in the IARP process. But once we get the rules more clearly defined, I think if I had to pick yes or no, I would lean toward yes. I think postseason bans should still be a bullet in the gun of punishment, because that's the one that really hurts. Lose recruiting days, not ideal, but not a big deal. Lose some scholarships, not ideal, but not a big deal. Not being able to participate in the NCAA tournament, that's a big deal. And if we're going to, take our rules seriously and punish programs accordingly that break them, then having that as a possible punishment, I think is probably more of a good thing than a bad thing. Let's move on. Our Candid Coaches series is underway. Got started this week. The answers to the first and second questions have been finalized. We'll get into that next. But first, a word from our partners.
Celebrate one of music's most beloved. Join some of the world's most legendary artists for a global live tribute concert, honoring the life, the love, and the legacy of Taylor Hawkins. The Taylor Hawkins Tribute Concert, streaming live September 3rd on Paramount Plus, and catch the encore special at 10/9 Central on CBS.
So our Candid Coaches series is underway. The answers to the first and second questions have been finalized. Norlander noted, I don't really want to rush through this, but I do have a flight to catch.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get to New York, obviously for CBS Sports Network, but I'm going to Arthur Ashe Stadium tonight to pay my respects to Queen Venus and Queen Serena.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I've never been. So I don't need to miss this flight. So let's try to get through this pretty quickly. The first question we ask is one we ask every year. we asked roughly 100 coaches who they think will be the best team in college basketball this upcoming season. And though Gonzaga and Houston are in the betting markets, co-favorites to win the 2023 NCAA tournament, the leading vote getter was North Carolina at 37%. Houston was second with 28%. The Zags, the team I have first in the top 25 and 1, came in third at 20%. And then fourth was Kentucky at 5%. So I think there's a couple of possible surprising things there. North Carolina being 9% percentage points better than anybody else. Gonzaga being third. And Kentucky being fourth, which is where I have them in the top 25 and 1, but only getting 5% of the vote. There isn't a consensus number one. I think you and I have known that was going to be the case for a while. But 85% of the vote did go to one of three teams, either North Carolina, Houston, or Gonzaga. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by North Carolina winning. I was surprised that Gonzaga wasn't top 2. And I was surprised by how distant of a fourth Kentucky was. Now, we're asking coaches, you pick one. So it's understandable, why the vote broke the way that it did. But I thought the cluster of teams would be stronger, or at least more populated than it was. Like, we did have a number, some other teams got a vote here, a vote there. But yeah, I think Carolina bringing everyone back, making the title game, ending Duke the way it did, replacing Manick with Pete Nance is going to be a really good shooter as well. A lot of coaches were just completely sold on that. And then Houston, Houston, it just speaks to how respected Kelvin Sampson is on the floor. But it's amazing, and we touched on this a little bit on the Houston pod, so we can get on to the next question. But the fact that we're talking about Houston, it's going to go into the season with its highest outlook, most optimistic since Elijahman and Drexler were there. And even then, they could be considered better within the context of this season than they were in any of those seasons. It's pretty remarkable there. But yeah, Carolina wins out over Houston and Gonzaga. Be interesting to see if all three of those teams, and Kentucky, sure, wind up as the 4-1 seeds when we get to March. Something will probably break, and one of those teams won't be on the top line.
I obviously thought those four schools would be the top four. Again, that replicates the top 25 and 1. Not that anybody's copying the top 25 and 1, but I think those are on paper fairly clearly the four best teams in the country on paper. We'll see what happens when the game starts. The only surprising thing to me there was the order, slightly surprising. And I thought that Kentucky would be more in line with Carolina, Houston, Gonzaga than so far behind Carolina, Houston, Gonzaga. I would have thought Kentucky might get 15 to 20% of the vote. Maybe UNC a little less, Houston a little less, Gonzaga a little less, and then split those numbers, give them to Kentucky. But it's perfectly reasonable results. For what it's worth, 12 different teams, and we only asked for one name. Yes. 12 different teams got votes. Yeah. And they were the top 11 in the top 25 and 1, plus Virginia. Virginia is the only team I don't have in the top 25 and 1 that got a vote. And what's interesting is there was a coach who voted for Virginia, and then there was another coach who was an ACC coach who didn't vote Virginia, but went out of his way to say, and oh, by the way, I think Virginia is going to be really good. This was an ACC coach, and he said, I think Virginia finishes first or second in our league. And what that means is that Virginia, he thinks they're going to finish higher than either North Carolina or Duke. Can't finish first or second without finishing higher than one of them. And North Carolina and Duke are both preseason top 10 teams. So keep an eye on Virginia. It made me reevaluate, go back and look at Virginia a little more closely, because at least two coaches told me they're going to be way better than most people seem to think they're going to be. The second question in our Candid Coaches series, and this one is publishing on Thursday, we asked roughly 100 coaches, what's the best home environment in college basketball? And we didn't just ask for one school. We asked for a top 3.
Right.
So we got ballots for this one. 1, yes. 2, 3. And the final order, I believe, the top 3 was Allen Fieldhouse, Kansas Jayhawks. Number 2 was Cameron Indoor, the Duke. And number 3 was the Kennel for Gonzaga, which, by the way, I think I told you this maybe in Slack or somewhere else. If I had to do it, that would be my ballot. 1 Kansas, 2 Duke, 3 Gonzaga, with Indiana as a possible The first two are obvious to me, Kansas and Duke. I could argue a lot of different ways for number 3, but I would lean toward I'd be picking probably between Gonzaga and Indiana.
I'm gonna give you all the schools here, and then we'll get you out of here so you can catch that flight. But yes, we asked coaches from what you've seen and/or experienced. So some coaches did tell me, I'm gonna give you 2 I've been to, and then I haven't been to this one, but I've talked to other coaches, or I've watched it on TV too many times. So some coaches did give me a kind of half and half. Some coaches said, I'm gonna give you 3 I've been to, and so that's why like Kansas didn't get a vote. He's like, I haven't been to Kansas, but it would be a vote. So Kansas actually got some votes because a coach had never been there, but he's like, how can I not pick Kansas? Sometimes Kansas did not get a vote because some coaches said, I'll give you 3 that I've been to, which wound up helping some other schools there. But Kansas was on 2 out of every 3 ballots, 67.3%. This should put, now there's no better group to ask than literally the coaches, the people that have gone to this sometimes for 3-4 decades. They've been inside literally hundreds of Division I arenas. There is no better group to ask than this. Kansas is your definitive winner. Kansas has the best home court environment in the entire sport. Duke got 50.5% of all ballots there, so a strong number 2. And then Gonzaga still on the top tier, 27.4%, but a big drop off. But again, the fact that Gonzaga's top 3 really speaks to what Mark Few has done there. Tier 2, Mackey Arena and McHale Center at Arizona. So Purdue and Arizona, both 15.8% of all ballots. Then Indiana and Rupp Arena at Kentucky are tied, 10.5% of all ballots. Tier 3, Breslin Center, Michigan State, 8.4% of all ballots. Koch Arena, the Roundhouse, Wichita State, Shouts, 8.4%. And then the other 2 in Tier 3 are Neville Arena, which is Auburn, formerly Auburn Arena, and then Texas Tech, both Auburn and Texas Tech at 7.4%. United Supermarkets Arena is Texas Tech. We got to change that. Oh, you cannot have one of the most intimidating environments in the sport be United's. No offense to the people behind what I'm sure is a wonderful company at United Supermarkets, but a United Supermarkets Arena, you got to give a nickname for that place. It's got to catch on. Those are Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. And then I'm going to give some love here. Schools that got at least 4 ballots: Grand Canyon, Arkansas, Butler, VCU, Tennessee, and Dayton. And then schools that got at least 3 ballots. If you're not on this list, I don't know what to tell you. We're talking about 300 total responses, right? 3 schools per 100 coaches is what it is. The other schools on at least 3 ballots: BYU, Illinois, Iowa State, Providence, and San Diego State. So those, if you just heard your name called in the past 2-3 minutes here, your school called, you have among the best home court environments in the entire sport. Kansas is the definitive winner, and I do think it's that is right. Like, Kansas is 1, Duke is 2, and here Gonzaga is a clear 3. I think Purdue and Arizona and Indiana have a viable claim to 3, but in the eyes of the coaches, it's not. It's Gonzaga. But those other 3, I think, should be sitting at the table. There are some wonderful quotes in here, but I'm not going to spoil them. I want you to go read the story. It's on the site Thursday at cbssports.com. We've got a lot of quotes about a lot of schools. Some schools that even got only a couple of votes, like, St. Bonaventure got a good quote in there. And I don't know. My last thought on this, Parrish, is this question in particular really got me revved up for the season. I try to get to 2 or 3 new venues every season that I've not been to. And in COVID, it just reminded us, like, we already knew this, but it was like when we did not have fans in arenas, like, it's like, man, really a lot of the magic of this sport has been stripped away. This question and hearing coaches talk about what they've gone through, it got me really geeked up for the start of the season. And it's bragging rights there. So congrats to the schools and fan bases that made it, because you're the ones who bring these buildings. So the buildings are awesome. It's the fan bases and the students within that bring the brick and mortar to life. And that's how they shook out. We'll have another Candid Coaches on Friday, and then next week and the week after, and we'll talk about those as the pod moves along.
Of all the ones you named, I've been to almost all of them. The only ones I haven't been to, I've never been to the McHale Center at Arizona.
I have, and it was legit. It would be on my top 5.
I've never been to Grand Canyon.
No, I've never been to Mackey. That was the highest rated one I've not been to.
I've been to Mackey. I think of everyone you named, the only ones I haven't been to are Grand Canyon, Arizona, and Iowa State. I've never been to Iowa State.
You've been to Tech? Yeah, you told me you got
I was the Bobby Knight thing.
Yeah, Bobby Knight thing. You were at Auburn last year.
I've been to Auburn. I've been to BYU. I've been to Illinois. I've been to I've been to, well, I've never been to a Dayton game, but I've been to Dayton Arena.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I've been there for the first 4, but I don't think I've been to a Dayton game. I've been to Providence. I've been to, I've been all Breslin Center.
You've been to San Diego State?
I've been to San Diego State.
There we go. They love you.
Jimmer.
Ah, there we go. There you go.
Been to San Diego State. It was great. All of them. I've been to Coke Arena. Great. All of them are great. And I will tell you that, this is more of a what's the best over a period of time. But like you're not going to find much better than Auburn last season. Mm-hmm. It was, I know it doesn't have the history of being an awesome place, but it is currently an awesome place.
Some coaches, by the way, real quick, they did say, listen, I if I could give you in fact, one coach said, I would give you Wichita State 9 years ago, but I don't know if I can give it to it. Some coaches were literally like, I'm going to judge this over a span of time versus whatever. But I think Auburn actually benefited from being good in the past too. Because if we do this 5 years ago, Auburn's not making the top tier.
No, but if you do it 5 years ago, Coke Arena probably does. I don't know that it's the same right now, but at the height of Greg Marsh, Fred Van Vliet, Ron Baker, all that place was wild, excellent. So been all of them except for those 3 I named. So that's always a fun just to sort of get the coaches and as it pertains to Allen Fieldhouse. I haven't had Big 12 coaches who consider Kansas a rival. Like they don't like Kansas, but they're like, it's the best.
Come on. I think I personally, I think it's like 51-49 with Cameron. Cameron's
awesome.
Cameron is, and it's smaller. I will if Duke fans want to make I will listen to it. But the coaches are the experts here, and Kansas is a definitive winner. The Jayhawks have the best home court environment in the entire sport.
And so like Kansas, for me, the guarantee is Kansas Duke have to be 1 and 2 in some order. Now I'll argue everything else, but those two got to be in your top 2 in some order. And then I know there's some Kentucky fans or Carolina fans that are probably like, but our place is great. And those places are.
Carolina I don't think you sent me. Carolina got 1 vote. I got 1 vote for North Carolina.
I don't think I got any. North Carolina's neat. You walk in, you see the banners. It's the Dean Dome, but it's just
it's big, man.
It's just
it's good. Don't get me wrong. And same thing with Rupp. I had some coaches be like, Rupp wouldn't be in my top 10. It's too big. So
I don't like, when Rupp's filled up, it's you look at the band, the whole deal. It's Rupp Arena. It's a significant place with a great, historically great basketball program, but I never really got the feels walking in there or walking in Dean Smith Center the way you can get them when you're like, oh wow, the Cameron Indoor, this is something. Allen Fieldhouse, this is something. Even the Kennel, like this is, oh boy, this is something. Maybe that's the common denominator. They're just too big to be viewed as these incredible college basketball environments. So maybe downsize at some point. Maybe. If you want to get on this type of list, maybe downsize it at some point. Shouts to Devin Downey, shouts to Chester, South Carolina, shouts to Huck and Larnell. Thank you guys once again for listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. At Apple, 5 stars, leave a nice review, type some words. There's more of us than there are of them, and we will talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.